Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
All right. Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm super excited to have Jim Cantrell with us here today. This guy's a rock star in space systems and a champion auto builder and racer, apparently. I didn't realize that's super cool. Jim has held positions with NASA, SpaceX, the French Space Agency, CEO of Vector Space, Strat Space, CTO at Moon Express, president of United Start Launch, president of Vintage Exotics, and the CEO of IDARE. Is that right? A biomedic? Metrics?
Yeah, that was
IDARE.
software.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Identification error? Is it some sort of?
It was Touch's fingerprint image.
Okay. Yep. ID. That's one that's always confused me. This ID stands for identification.
I don't make up the acronyms. I just report them.
Right. You're currently the CEO and co-founder of Phantom Space, where you lead a company that offers launch services, spacecraft design and construction, and constellation launch and deployment. Is that right?
That's correct.
Which is cool. We can talk a little bit about that, how you deploy in the different series, and apparently another endeavor right now, quantum motors, which sounds awesome.
Yep.
Oh, super cool. Where should we start, Jim?
You tell me. What do you want to know?
Let's start with the cars and how you, I mean, that's where I imagine you started, right, as a kid?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so the only thing I've ever been able to imagine I wanted to do for sure in life was race cars, and that started when I was very young. And the earliest pictures of me, I've got a little race car in front of me because I wouldn't let them take studio photographs of me
Without you.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah. So I grew up on a farm in Southern California, and had a lot of barn space to build stuff. And I got into go-karts, and we lived on a hill, so I built these soapbox derbies, which I later started robbing my dad's lawnmower engines to put in there. Not to his pleasure, let me tell you. And then I graduated into real steel go-karts, and I raced them when I was younger. And I think the last one I took a 250cc engine out of a Yamaha and put it in there, and about killed myself in it. So my parents sold it, but that was where I started. Now I race cars, mainly sports car racing, road racing, and do a lot of endurance events. So sometimes 4 hours, sometimes 12, sometimes 24 hour, and it's usually a team of drivers and a lot of preparation. And so that's my reason to be. And that's I always say, if I make more money, I'll buy more cars.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So I want to hear about your cars. I'll share real quick that this summer, my son and I went, I think it was called the Firebird East track. We're through with NASA. They just have like entry level stuff for us. And so I took my wife's Mustang GT, and he took his Audi S5 on there. My son and I raced our cars around on the track. That was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. That's a little bit like putting the heroin needle in your arm. You may not
get a taste.
That. Yeah. Yeah. So okay. I run the Sports Car Club of America. They're sort of the companion to NASA here in Arizona. So we put on races every year, and it consumes all the spare time that I can give it.
Oh, excellent. So what's your current project or cars you're focused on?
Well, so you mentioned Vintage Exotics, and that's actually a going concern I have. My daughter works there, and I've got a couple other people, and we actually have customer cars. So we're restoring an old '69 Corvette that ran in the 24 Hours of Daytona back in the day. And it's a real historic car. And then we've got another car that somebody had an MGB. They wanted me to put an LS Chevy V8 in it, and so that's about done. And then I've got various cars of my own that I'm always restoring. I have an old Lamborghini that's under restoration, and an old Sunbeam Tiger, and then a dragster. So I used to drag race, so I went and bought what's called a AA altered fuel dragster. So I'm going to put that.
Was that in Southern California? Were those the Dragon days? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. And tell us about quantum motors. You're not putting any of these electric motors in your cars? Is that forbidden?
I like electric cars. I have two of them, the Mercedes variety, and I have them because they're a different technology, and I think it's very interesting. It's a software-defined vehicle, right, as opposed to these gasoline-powered things I like, for racing. But Quantum motors. I had a friend of mine introduce me to a Chinese guy who had invented this motor technology. It's super efficient. So, like any of your electric cars have typically like 95% efficiency, and that 5%, if it's hundreds of horsepower, is heat. So these
Okay.
motors are 99% efficient.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a very, very unique technology called axial flux motors that he's got a way of getting that efficiency weight up. So we started that company about 9 months ago, and we're building those and selling them. A lot of it goes to the aircraft industry, the eVTOLs, as they call them, electric vertical takeoff and landing
Yep.
kinds of aircraft, and drones. We're making a lot of motors for drones, and they're all
Okay.
from quarter of a horsepower to 500 horsepower. So we're
Wow.
also building some electric motor applications for spacecraft. So these things all reside kind of under one roof.
Can you, yeah, you brought up an interesting point. And can you elaborate a little bit on that 5% heat to 1% heat reduction? How big of a factor is that on the general use over time on an engine or a
Right.
motor?
So if you have, let's say, a 500 horsepower motor and you're losing 5% of that horsepower in heat, you've got 25 horsepower that's generating in heat. So you have to dissipate that. So
Yeah,
most people
what's
don't
the
realize.
detriment to the motor over time as well as what I was
They
kind
get
of
too
thinking
hot and they'll
about.
melt, so you have to
Yeah.
cool them, just like an internal combustion engine. I found this out with my Mercedes when I came out one day and there was a coolant leak under the car. I'm like, what do you mean a coolant leak on an electric car?
Electric,
It just
right.
had me baffled, right? And yeah, they all have cooling systems on them, just like a regular automobile. They're smaller, right?
Right.
So you still have to take that 25 horsepower worth of heat and get rid of it. If you reduce that down to say 1% loss, then you're talking about
Mhm.
5 horsepower. So that's the sort of thing you can do air cooling, kind of like old Volkswagens and old Porsches. So you
Oh, okay.
don't have those extra systems. So what that amounts to is a couple of things. Number one, you have a lighter engine, so you don't have to have that other capability on there. But it's also there's more power density to it,
Yep.
so you can have equivalent amount of horsepower in a much smaller package. So that's why these electric aircraft, are crazy over this because
Okay.
they're
They're
looking for
lighter
something.
and they last longer.
They do last longer. Yeah, yeah. These things are very, very efficient and
Okay.
have very few wear mechanisms.
Nice.
And then also the other thing is the batteries can be smaller. So everything cascades
Right.
in the right direction.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, that has implications everywhere. So that's awesome.
Yeah, electric motors in the middle of everything, right? Which is why I accepted the challenge to commercialize this. I was very excited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, once you've worn so many hats and you've done this a few times, it's kind of gets to be part of the fun of it. Is to start a new company around a new tech. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I guess you could say that. I don't mean to belittle it, but it's sort of this bridge of terror. Every time you do it, it's fun, and it's not so fun, and there's all those times. So I've just done it so many times. I'm on my 12th startup that, in the case of Quantum Motors, I don't run the company. I just know what bridges to cross, what bridges not to cross. We like to say that I know where all the landmines are buried, and we don't step on them. So.
Right.
So in other companies, earlier in my career, it was a lot harder because we were stepping on the landmines and recovering from them. But
Sure.
yeah, there's sort of a way to do it, and I've got my business partner, Mike D'Angelo, and he and I've been in on many of these together, and we just we've worked together for so many years that we just kind of know what the other's thinking, and it just makes it a lot easier.
Sure. Sure. Excellent. So it reminds me a little bit of that show Undercover Billionaire.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. So the context or the premise for people or listeners who may not be familiar is I don't remember the guy's name who did the first season,
yeah. It escapes me too.
Mark Sears or something. Anyway,
Yeah,
um, uh, the premise is they give you like $100 and a phone with no contacts in a city you've never been in, and you have like what is it? You have like 90 days or something to create a
right.
$1 million business, and you have
Yeah,
to go figure it all out on your own. And it's kind of fun because if you already have, it's all knowledge and skills based, so it's like just
yeah.
starting over, and you get to
Problem
show,
solved.
yeah, you get to go provide value and solve problems and as quickly as
Yeah.
possible. And once you know the game, it seems like it seems like they enjoy it anyway.
It's addictive, right? It's just like auto racing. It's just very, very addictive. Yeah.
Cool, cool. So Okay, so can you give us a background on Phantom Space and how the other
Yeah.
different like Moon Express and some of these other things you're providing launch services and stuff? It seems like
Yeah.
a natural fit to and it's how many of them have been based here in Arizona as well?
So Quantum Motors is here, Phantom Space is here, Vector was here, and Vintage Exotics is here, Stratspace is here. Yeah.
Okay,
So all
okay,
of them in the past 20 years that I've, been one of the co-founders in has been here. Yeah.
okay, okay. And when did Phantom Space start?
2019,
Right at COVID.
right at the beginning of COVID. Yeah, in fact, we ramped up and then COVID hit and we got rid of everybody. We thought it would be really hard to raise money. It turned out to be very easy to raise money during COVID, which was
Right.
awesome, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that's created an asset bubble that now we're still recovering from, but it's kind of coming back to normal. But yeah, no, Phantom, it was sort of the ultimate of all the aerospace companies I started. I'll just give you a little history. So I was the guy that Elon Musk called out of the blue in 2001 to go buy Russian rockets, and he wanted to do this Mars mission. So I was the guy that took him over there. And when those deals fell apart, we started SpaceX. I was employee number four. So Phantom is the 12th startup, if that was the first. And I went back and got a bunch of the guys from the early days of SpaceX. I was the guy that put the whole team together in the early days.
Okay.
And so Phantom really is the sort of the idea that was left on the table at the beginning of SpaceX. SpaceX has always been about going to Mars, and we thought there was another play left where more commercial in nature and more looking at the unmanned side of space and how we
Okay.
service that. So ultimately, what we're trying to do with Phantom is to become the Henry Ford of space. And Henry Ford, 120 years ago, had the audacity to make a product, the automobile, in a time where a new car costs three times what you would pay for a home, and he was going to make it for several $100s, which somebody could earn in a few months, and
Right.
was very successful and changed the world with it. So space right now has the same problem. It's way expensive. It takes too long. You got to go find special people like me that know about it, that have spent years in university learning about it, and we're difficult to get along with. And then maybe a few years after you raise a lot of money and do this, you might have a space company. We want to make space like e-commerce is today, where you get on a website and you build out your e-commerce platform in a matter of hours or days, and then you have a space company. And so to do that, we have this thing we call Phantom Cloud, which think of it as an extension of the cloud AWS into space. And this is our constellation of satellites that will take all the data that's generated in space. We'll be able to route it back through our network and have data centers in space that bring the AI to all this data that's otherwise trapped in space. And there's so much data being generated up in space right now. In just a few years, it's going to exceed what today is moving around the world on a daily basis on the World Wide Web. And most of that data is tossed because it can't get it all back. And so
Huh.
what these data centers in space will do is give people the opportunity to take AI to that big data set and create value in ways that none of us can imagine today. Just like the internet was something that was a tool for people to create value that I think few of us saw way back when. I was one of the very early adopters of the internet back in the early 90s, and I had no idea what it would do today. And I think space is in the same domain. Space is a $700 billion a year economy right now. It's going to be over $1 trillion a year by the end of the decade. And it's going to be one of the biggest economies on Earth within about 20 years. We're just at the beginning of it. So it's a lot like what the New World must have been 500 years ago when the settlers first started coming here,
Hmm.
and so much potential that nobody could imagine. So,
Right.
so Phantom Cloud is our way of digitizing the space commerce. Right now, it's very clunky, very slow. So, in order to deploy our own constellation and do it in a way that we can raise the money to build it out, we build our own launch vehicle. We build our own satellites, and so the launch vehicle is one of these things that's akin to a bridge going across a river. It's without it, you can't get into space. If you think of space as being on the other side of the river, and there's very few people that can make it work. So there's only been three private companies that have ever made it privately into space, and we intend to be the fourth one, and that will give us a very unique competitive advantage over everybody else that might have the same idea about data centers in space. They won't be able to scale it like we can scale it because we own our own launch vehicle, so we can do it on
Okay.
internal cost and our own internal priority. If you know about Starlink, which is the
Hmm.
broadband system that's run through satellites, I have three systems in various businesses and homes around that I have, and it works beautifully. But it's 8,000 satellites, and 75% of everything SpaceX launches is their Starlink. So this is the secret sauce to future space enterprises, is they all must have launch if they want to dominate, and the rest are just going to be waiting around for Uncle Elon or Uncle Jeff or maybe Uncle Jim to launch them into space.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, you're the kind of the gatekeepers in that sense.
Yep.
Um, let's back up a second and explain to people what constellation launch and deployment it means.
Yeah, so we're talking about a lot of satellites that makes up a constellation. So it can be four or five, or it can be thousands. Starlink has 8,000. That's the biggest constellation in existence. There's another company in Phoenix named Iridium, and they have a
Mhm.
telephone service, and that used to be part of Motorola. And they first flew the constellation of 100 back in the year 2000. I helped them put up their last constellation about 15 years ago. And that's a more common number. So being able to deploy these kinds of numbers of satellites is something unique. So not only are we doing our own constellation, we're also doing it for customers. And
Right.
we've designed our rocket so that it's especially suitable to constellation deployment and then the
Okay.
maintenance of them, because you have to replace these satellites every now and then as they fail or age out.
Okay. Do they have a pretty narrow range, or is it a wide range? You don't know which ones are going to fail at any given time, and you have to be able to sort of replace them piecemeal.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So these big populations of satellites are relatively new, and Iridium was the biggest constellation in the world at one point. And we found some interesting behaviors in these 100 satellites. Like some were evil children, as we called them, and they would just misbehave. Some were very well behaved. They all had personality, and
Hmm.
we found there was a batch of early failures. We call them infant failures that were due to just basic design flaws that we corrected pretty quick, or we developed workarounds from. And then over time, there ended up being another batch of failures that came from things that were degrading that weren't expected to degrade in space. And then ultimately, the thing that took out the satellites was just the solar panels that, like you have on your house. They just degrade over time from radiation.
Huh.
And
Okay.
so they were designed, Iridium was designed for 5 years, and they only needed 67 to operate. But they had 100 because they had a lot of spares in orbit. And
Okay.
because back when they were first put up, you couldn't get launch very easily. So, every launch you had to savor it and use it very carefully.
Yeah.
And, so we put the on-orbit spares in there, and some of them died before they got used, which was kind of ironic.
Huh.
But, if you have a smaller launch vehicle like we have, and that's launched often, we're talking about launching daily
Okay.
in our ultimate scenario. You can just hop
Wow.
on a bus and put it in the orbit that you need it to be, rather than jumping on one of these big rockets that cost, $65 million. Ours only cost six.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Before you do, actually, I just wanted you kept mentioning the degradation of these materials. I think I just saw a few weeks ago, was it Japan or somebody was wood. They had some sort of wood satellite structure. Is
Yeah.
that like that? Is the material up there really that tricky to get to last?
Yes and no. Some of it can be pretty tricky. What happens? There's two big effects up there. So the atmosphere stops a lot of radiation from the sun, high energy particles and things like that. So
Hmm.
we all don't have to endure that. as much, although there is still some here and it's particularly when you get higher in the mountains, like in Utah, you got a lot more of that radiation incoming into your body. But in space, we get a lot more of it. So that radiation tends to embrittle some materials, like plastics in particular. And then mostly metallics are fine, but sometimes like lubricants and things like that get degraded by radiation over time. It just chemically
Okay.
changes them. These high,
And the electrovoltaic photocells apparently don't last very well.
yeah. So like silicon, as you get bombarded by these high energy particles, it literally changes the physics
Right.
on the granular structure in the silicon, and over
Right.
time they just degrade to where they don't work anymore.
Okay.
The other
Right.
thing is what's called monatomic oxygen. So oxygen normally is two molecules. In space, there's a lot of it's just one molecule, and it's extremely oxidative. It's very,
Huh.
very hard on all sorts of materials, particularly plastics.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so back to the Phantom rockets and
Yeah,
the bus or whatever you mentioned. How can you
yeah.
explain that to us?
So yeah, normally, like if you watch the SpaceX rockets, the Falcon 9 or their big Starship, those are fairly large rockets. They're putting 20,000 pounds in the case of Falcon 9 into orbit, and in the case of Starship, it's about 150 tons into orbit. So it's kind of like, we're flying a Cessna and those guys are flying A380s,
Right.
and
Right.
so there are some satellites that will require a full Falcon 9. There are no satellites that ever require a full Starship. That those are so big.
Sure.
The only thing they're really efficient at is planetary settlement, which is why, everybody now knows that's what SpaceX is about, and that's what they're going to attempt, and that's great. But we look at the market from a different point of view. 95% of the satellites that are flown every year weigh less than 1,000 pounds. So we've designed a rocket to carry that class of satellites. Again, Henry Ford, right? We're talking about 95% of the market. And so we make a rocket that's quite a bit smaller and can be, each stage can be put in a sea container like you see on railroad containers
Yep. Yep.
or on the back of semis, and they can be road transported. We build it so that it can utilize all of the commercial available
Transit.
transportation.
Right.
Yeah, that cuts
I,
down on the costs a lot.
I heard on that note. I don't know if our listeners had. Do you want to share the Roman horse's ass of a chariot and how that dictates our space program? You,
I'm not sure I know that one.
oh, well, so yeah, it was interesting to me because um, the wheels on a chariot had to be a certain width so the horses didn't have to step in the grooves. And so all the trails throughout Europe were based off of these Roman off
Right.
of the width of a horse's ass, and so that's what they used for the railroads, and that became the
Aha.
standard. And then so now even the
And
space
change.
the
Yeah.
space rocket parts have to fit on a train, and
Yeah.
so the
We can
width of a
only be so
horse's
long.
ass
Yeah.
dictated the size of our
That's funny.
spaceships, which I thought was funny.
Yeah, you could still see the wagon wheel ruts in the old Roman roads in Europe. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
well, I didn't realize there was a correlation there. But yeah, so
it's loose.
yeah, a horse's ass in our rockets. That's good.
Anyway,
Um,
so but to your point, that the Phantom rocket sizes can be transported.
Yeah, they're about 65 foot tall in total, and they're in multiple stages, so we can take them apart. We build them out of, just regular aluminum, what's called 6061 T6, very readily available. We weld the
Okay.
tank together here in Tucson. We have a robotic welder system that we've been building the tanks with. Nothing exotic. And we have to build our own valves, for example, strangely. I mean, we try to buy everything we can that's on the market and not develop it
Okay.
ourselves. But like valves, you can't just go to
Hmm.
valves.com and buy rocket valves. So we ended up having to build those ourselves. We
Okay.
buy the engines from companies. Strange that you can actually find rocket engines, companies that build those and sell them. So we've done that. And what we've managed to do is create a rocket that we can sell for $6 million and still make a boatload of money on. And that's not
In
a
deployment. Okay.
fantasy. It's
Nice.
a real number, because we built several of them already. We know what they cost.
Right.
And the other side of it is we went out and gathered up, what I think of as the world's scarcest real estate, which is launch pads. And there's only 4 or 5 launch sites in the U.S. One's Cape Canaveral in Florida, which everybody knows about, and then there's another one in California called Vandenberg on the
Yep.
coast. And if you ever see the rockets at night lighting up the night sky, that's coming from Vandenberg.
Yep.
And then there's one in Alaska, which is hard to get to, and there's one in Virginia, it's hard to get to.
I thought there's one down in Texas at the.
And SpaceX owns the one in Texas, right? And that's for them only, because it's theirs. So we went out and gathered up these old federal launch pads that had been abandoned by the federal government because we knew there wasn't any more going to be made. And so we've, along with that, very quietly, it's kind of like real estate, right? We got the real estate, and then we went and just like you go to the city council or the county or whoever, we got the zoning in place. So we got the rights to launch.
You lobby for interstellar. Is that like a spaceport zoning?
Spaceport. Well, yeah. So you have to go through the environmental regulatory process and the safety regulatory process. So we spent the last 5 years doing that. And now we have probably only second to SpaceX, the largest approved throughput capacity of any company in the world. So we also own these sites by virtue of a 100-year lease. And so we don't get charged by anybody for use of the site. So that's how we keep our costs down. We launch a lot, we build them cheaply, and then we don't have any launch costs. So we think we can be extremely competitive in the world. We're probably one of the lowest cost vehicles in the world. And when we get going here in about 18 months, the world, you'll hear more and more about Phantom. But we chose the name very specifically to be very quiet. And it was hard to be quiet for 6 years and still raise money. Trust me on that. And but we've done it, and we're gonna be a big success. And Arizona will be known as one of the biggest sources of rockets in the nation.
Excellent. Very cool. Very cool. You mentioned earlier trying to source rockets from Russia. It's already that was early on. That wasn't a viable option.
Yeah, no, it didn't work out. So a little bit of my personal history. One of my first jobs was the French Space Agency in Toulouse, France, and I moved there in '89 and worked on a joint Soviet-French mission to Mars. And that was back when they were still the Soviet Union, and maybe that wasn't a smart thing. I was a Reagan voter back then, so it wasn't like I was impressed with the communists. Right. But I learned Russian, and I learned about the Russian aerospace system when I was there. And then after the putsch in 1991, when Gorbachev was deposed, the whole program fell apart, and I came back to the U.S. Short stories, I got recruited by an intelligence agency in the U.S. here to go back and help stop brain drain in the former Soviet Union. There were a lot of missile scientists and nuclear weapons scientists that were being hired by the North Koreans and the Iranians. So my job was to use government money to help keep them busy. And so we did a lot of things like convert ICBMs, which were designed to destroy all of us. We converted them to satellite launchers. They had been treated out and were just sitting in warehouses. And we thought that made a very bad temptation to proliferate into the third world. And so we helped the Russians transform those. So when Elon got this idea to do a Mars mission, he said, "Hey, who do I know that can help me get a Russian rocket to launch to Mars?" Because they were cheap. They were like $3 and $4 million a piece back then, which the West couldn't touch. Our equivalent rockets were 85, 90 million.
Oh, wow. That's a bargain.
Yeah.
3 million's a bargain. Yeah.
Right. Well, the Russians could have controlled the entire commercial launch industry, but they were really stupid in how they did it. And one of the seminal moments where that history changed was when I was with Elon in Moscow, and we were serious about buying the rockets. We put a team together to look at this Mars mission. We were going to grow a plant in a growth chamber on Mars, and we found out which rockets would work. And I, made my way into these guys with Elon, and they called him a little boy. They didn't know I spoke Russian. And in one meeting, they were calling him a boy behind his scenes. And the other one, the chief designer, was, making all sorts of profanities, and the translator was not translating them, and he was not impressed with us either. So we decided to make a rocket ourselves. That's how SpaceX started.
Okay.
But yeah, there's an interesting twist. I wrote a book called Breaking All the Rules, which goes into this whole story of how SpaceX came about, and it was a series of fateful things in history that happened, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. So small role in a very very big thing.
Okay. How long did it take you to write it?
That book took me about 9 years to write.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I started it back in like 2012, and I decided to call it "My Name Is Ian Musk." So the first chapter I wrote was what's now one of the middle chapters about how Elon came to me. And I thought his name was Ian, but then as I sent the manuscript out, people started asking, "Well, what prompted you? Why'd you get into the space business? I thought you were a car guy." And so I had to tell that part of the story, and so that part's a little autobiographical. And then we talked about I talked a lot about the whole Soviet Union and my experiences there, and I got arrested in Russia in '96, and then what happened after that, right? What this led to. So that's what the story's about. But there's a lot of trauma in there along the way that just I mean, I had to stop writing for a while because of some of the stuff I'd gone through in Russia, and I was
Oh,
reliving
wow.
it, right? I'd buried it back in my head some,
Right.
and I started reliving it, and it was very traumatic. I remember having nightmares where I'd wake up and I thought the Russians were suffocating me.
Oh,
It was
man.
yeah, it was terrifying. I don't feel that way anymore because I got through it. But I published
So,
it first about 3.5 years ago.
okay. Okay. Was it, so in retrospect, was it kind of therapeutic or cathartic to go through it again?
Yeah, it
You,
was. It's one of these things that, in a way, you look back on things that have happened to you that have been close calls or near death experiences, and in a way, it scares you more. But in another way, you realize you survived it. And I found out, like I was telling you before we started this, that I'm very calm when I'm in a life and death situation. You don't know that until you're there. And some people just aren't, and some people just are. And so that, having written this really helped me sort of put all this in perspective. And, I now see that I was incredibly blessed. I am incredibly blessed with being, a part of history and having had
sure.
the ability to put my mark on it, and very proud of that, and but also humbled by it, right? So
Right.
yeah, it's a lot of things. And there's some guys I'm talking to that are making a movie out of it. So
Cool.
don't
I mean,
know.
this is your player and maybe kind of the golden age of the space industry, right? Sort of
Yeah, yeah. I'm the bridge
renaissance.
between what we called the era of Apollo or
Right.
Space 1.0 and 2.0, and then what we're trying to do with the Phantom is to make it 3.0, which is the digital age in space.
Right.
So yeah, I'm just old enough. I'll be 60 this year. Just old enough to have had my foot with the Apollo generation. My first boss, worked on he was the program manager for the Ranger mission, which is the America's first lunar mission. It was literally a spacecraft that just ran into the moon. So he was my mentor, and all of his
Cool.
friends and colleagues. These are all guys that built, the Saturn V, and Charlie Duke is a personal friend of mine. He walked on the moon, so yeah,
Oh, wow.
it's an interesting bridge, that we were the orphans of Apollo because we always felt like the Apollo promise to go to Mars and to live in space was there. And that was what always, infatuated me with space. And, the US government screwed that up by just,
Shutting
not
it down.
doing what we thought they should be doing with the taxpayer money. And it eventually became kind of a jobs program. And that's what fueled the rest of us who were, wanting a revolution. And I like to say that Elon didn't start the revolution. He walked into one, and he became the de facto leader because he had the leadership skills and the money and the friends who had money to make it real. And that's how that happened. And that's what the story of breaking all the rules is.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. I'm looking forward to reading it. I think my copy's in the mail.
Yeah, it will be tomorrow.
Oh, okay. All right. Excellent. Excellent. So that, I mean, that it's such a huge legacy, right? To be part of that. Um, and now with Phantom, I mean, you have sort of, and you're kind of a bit more of a personal aspect to the legacy, I guess, right? Is that how you see it?
Well, Phantom is one of these things where I know it needs to be done. Nobody's doing it. And anybody that might do it, I don't think is going to do it right. So it drives me plumb crazy. And so I have to do it, right? I just
That's
feel absolutely compelled. I mentioned I'm 60 this year. I should be retired, but I can't stand it. And so it's not about money. If I had more money, I'd buy more cars. This is about doing something that nobody else is doing. It has to be done.
right. And well, you know the significance, you have the skills. Um, I guess when uh, you can see it. And most people can't see the vision or don't know that it's even possible, I guess is what I mean. And that's got to be
Yep.
frustrating.
Yep. Well, I feel cursed, frankly, by my ability to see the future. And I've seen so many things, that I didn't act on. I could see them coming and I just never acted on them. And but it's a burden to be able to see what's coming and feel this need to do something, right? I feel compelled that if I'm saying, why am I seeing this? Why can I see this? And I know what we're doing with Phantom Cloud is something that will help create this new frontier of intellectual and human freedom that is just very, very important to the future of humanity to remain intellectually free, to harness this frontier. Frontiers are what's kept us free all these years. So it's the force against tyranny, and boy, I tell you what, the promise of space is something that no tyrant and no government can control. And I see it, I can feel it, I can taste it, I can smell it, and I can't stop myself. We've got to do this.
Cool, cool. Uh, how exciting was it? I mean, there's different programs you've been a part of, like Moon Express. I don't know. I don't remember their exact goal. Who just went to the moon this year?
Yeah, that was Firefly.
Firefly?
Yeah,
The
so
Firefly?
yeah, the CEO of that company is a good friend of mine.
Okay.
Was his mentor early in his career. But
Very
yeah,
cool.
no, it was the same program. Moon Express was one of many companies that won one of these NASA contracts to build commercial lunar landers. And for NASA, this was a bet that they put out, kind of the same that happened with SpaceX when the shuttle retired. NASA said, look, we're going to try to do it ourselves and we'll spend a lot of money. We may get there eventually, but if we let it, low cost commercial contracts out, let's see how they do. And eventually, the guys at Intuitive Machines launched two of them. They both fell over. And I know those guys very well. In fact, at Moon Express, we were teamed with them, but we were trying to build our lunar lander, and we just ran out of capital. Is what happened on that. So that was one of the ones out of the 12. I've had two fail. That was one of the two failures. But you learn from these things.
Sure.
So just like wrecking a race car, you dust yourself off, you count your fingers, and you go, okay, let's get back on the track, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, so that's what we did with Moon Express, and that's where I met my current business partner, Mike D'Angelo. And as far as I'm concerned, that was the purpose of Moon Express, was so I could meet Mike.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. And is there any sort of overlap in the technologies at all for like Firefly and Moon Launch and Phantom? Or are they just really different beasts?
No, they're pretty much all the same technology. So, like Firefly has a successful launch vehicle, and they're the third private company, has been successful to get to space. Ironically, all the ones that have made it have been very frugal, right? They're all very tight with money, and because it's an expensive endeavor. But there's been a lot of rocket companies, one started by Richard Branson, as a matter of fact,
Mm. Right.
they spent billions and they went out of business because they weren't frugal with their money. But Firefly, I mean, I think that's one of the defining characteristics that we all share. SpaceX, their first rocket, Falcon 1, we built for $100 million. Rocket Lab, which is out of New Zealand, same thing, about $130 million. and Firefly, they were in about 180, and we're going to be under 100 for ours. And we all have rocket engines that burn more or less the same fuels. And there's nothing, it's to sound funny, there's nothing really advanced about rockets. The technology has been the same for 50 years at least, if not
Okay.
more. And we're in that incremental revolution or evolution, if you will, of rocket technology. So yeah, most of our stuff is the same. The problem is finding the people that can actually make it work. And I liken
Okay.
this to a Formula One car. If I had a Formula One team that sent a box of Formula One car parts that were supposed to go together and it arrived in any neighborhood in the US, you could find a few guys could maybe screw it together and make it look like a Formula One car. If you got my friends and me, we could screw it together and make it run.
Hmm.
But we probably wouldn't be competitive with the Formula One team. And then the Formula One teams, there's only a few of those guys in the world that can actually make those things competitive. There's a
Make them
handful of them.
sing, right?
Yep. Rocket designers and people that know how to make rockets, they're the latter. They're the Formula One teams.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. Um, where can you share where the Arizona launch area is? Where
So we're not
located?
launching from Arizona. We're going to launch from
Oh.
California, Vandenberg, and or Florida, Cape
Oh, I
Canaveral.
thought you had real estate that was.
That's in California and
Oh, it
Cape
is. Okay.
Canaveral. Yeah, it's
Okay.
on
Okay.
federal launch ranges. So
Okay.
as it turns out, the FAA regulates the safety of our launches, and so the bottom line is we have to launch out over water.
Okay.
We could physically launch from the Walmart parking lot, here in Tucson.
Right.
I could
Right.
do that once, and I'd probably be, walked away in chains. But the problem is the public safety of a rocket is considered too high for the FAA to
Okay.
license it.
Okay.
So we're forced to fly out over water, which is why everything launches from those sites. I don't think that's going to change in the near future. Although there is a spaceport in Yuma that people are working on, and we would fly due south out of there, a short distance over Mexico. So if we're able to demonstrate enough reliability and there's not a lot of people, that may be in the cards. And so we're very supportive of the Yuma spaceport.
Okay.
Here in Tucson, we are building a launch pad on some city-owned land that they lease to us. But that launch pad won't be used to launch. It'll be used to test our vehicles.
Okay.
So there will be a launch pad here in Arizona, just not for launching.
Okay. 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 So, yeah, as we wrap things up here, I have a zillion questions for you. I'm geeking out on all this. It's great. Uh, did I see there was I don't know if it's an advance in rocket technology, but like the 3D propulsion printer and stuff.
Oh, 3D
Are they,
printing.
yeah, are they getting better at making those, or it's not really? I mean, if
Yeah,
it's just
no,
liquid oxygen or whatever, it's
yeah, no, the fuels are all the same. It's kerosene and liquid oxygen is mostly what we use. There are some using methane, but that's like the big one in Texas. Elon's got is methane.
okay. Okay.
But yeah, the engines are almost all 3D printed now. So I don't know if your listeners know what 3D printing is, but I have one in my shop that I can print little plastic parts out of. We're talking about 3D printers can print metal, so things like titanium, Inconel, aluminum, a number of metals that can be used in rocket engines. So why would you want to 3D print these things? Well, there's a lot of little small channels and stuff. If you look at the bell nozzle of a rocket engine, they've got all sorts of cooling channels in it. And so you can print those in without having to go through very extensive and expensive manufacturing processes to build the inside and then to plate it with copper and then to build the outside and to plate all that and weld it together. That tends to be very expensive. So the bottom line of 3D printing of metal has been to drop the cost of the rocket engines drastically. That's been one of the things that's really
Okay.
allowed us to reach that $3 million mark. So
Really? Okay.
$2 million out of our three is rocket engine cost,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's from another
And
vendor. Yeah.
and are those recyclable at all?
They are actually.
Okay.
But you have to fly it back to recycle them.
Okay. Sure.
So SpaceX flies their Falcon 9 boosters back, and yeah, you do save some of that money. For them, it's actually so that they don't have to build another one and haul it all the way across the U.S. If you're up early on a Sunday morning, sometimes you'll see them hauling a Falcon 9 booster out on I-10, and they're closing I-10 down as they go along. It's very annoying, and it's very expensive. It takes them, a week and a half to get from coast to coast. And so they don't want to do that. So they fly their boosters back so they can have a higher rate of launch. And they don't have to replace that every time. Right. For us, it's more of an issue of if we drop hundreds of these things in the water a year, we're afraid somebody's going to, fish them out of the ocean and fire them back at us. So we're thinking a little differently. We're going to make ours reusable just so nobody else can get it. Yeah, because it's ICBM size. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was also wondering if you could just, even if it came down, if you had it in pieces, you could just reassemble it or even just melt it down and reprint it again.
You could do that. But what SpaceX does is they land those boosters, the first stage, and they go up to kind of like you do with your car with an OBD, tool, and you plug it in and everything says, yep, everything's fine. And they don't even wash the sides of it. So the sides are all black from the soot from coming back in. They start out life as a white rocket, but then they launch them and they're black. You go see them at the launch pad, and you're like, oh, that thing's still dirty.
Huh. It doesn't affect aerodynamics or enough to matter?
No, not at all. Yeah. It's the paint endures, and I guess every now and then they repaint them, but most of the time they just refly them.
Huh. Okay. Wow. This is all cool stuff. We got to wrap. This is my longest podcast.
Yeah.
Jim.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I appreciate it. So, any big plans or initiatives for the rest of 2025 coming up for you and any of your endeavors?
Yeah, we're finishing raising our Series B, which is somewhere between $60 and $100 million, and that's been a long time in the making. So we're really happy about that. We're building prototypes of our rocket. We'll be test firing those here in Arizona pretty soon. We look forward to our first launch in 2027.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. And this is Phantom Space on the website. We can track and learn about things there.
Yep. Phantomspace.com. Yep.
Okay. And if people wanted to learn more, connect with you or follow you, where can they go? What should they do?
Yeah, probably go to Twitter or X as they call it now. James N. Cantrell there. And if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I post a lot of stuff there too.
Awesome. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Thank you very much. Jim Cantrell.
Thanks, Tim.
Very much appreciate you being on. Everybody, thank you for listening and watching. This is, I think I'd want you back for more sometime when you can get an update on this stuff.
Bring me back when we launch.
Or we'll have a racing car episode.
There you go. We can do it from the racetrack. I'd like that.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Inspired by our guests? Visit PhoenixProsperityPodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.